Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today we're getting into something absolutely crucial. A truly practical toolkit for having real, meaningful workplace conversations. We're going to be exploring Chapter 18 of Fred Clements' fantastic book, 30 Coaching Tools and Approaches That Actually Work. Look, if you're a manager, a leader, or a coach, you already know that your conversations literally dictate your team's success. This isn't about some abstract academic theory, it's about real people and driving real change. So let's start with a universal frustration. Have you ever felt completely utterly stuck trying to help a team member move forward? You know the feeling. You're sitting there in a one-to-one, or maybe it's a performance review, and despite your absolute best efforts, the conversation is just going in circles. You want to empower them, you want them to take the reins, but it feels like you're pulling teeth just to get them to see their own role in the situation. It's incredibly frustrating, right? Both for you and for the person you're trying to help. Okay, let's dive into this. Because when these developmental conversations stall out, the symptoms across the workplace become incredibly obvious. You start seeing these really unclear conversations where no one actually knows what the next step is. You see a lack of confidence and shockingly poor ownership over outcomes. Feedback suddenly becomes weak or super defensive. Trust plummets, and ultimately you are left with stuck thinking. People are essentially trapped in their current mindset. And as a leader or coach, you need an intervention to break that cycle. And that is exactly where this framework comes in. The accountability ladder. Think of it as your navigational map out of all that frustration. What makes this tool stand out so much, and why it's such a highlight in the book, is how unbelievably clean and simple it is. When a conversation is messy, you do not need some complex matrix. You need a shared landscape that you can actually look at together. So in plain language, what is it? Well, the accountability ladder is a practical diagnostic tool. It gives people a straightforward way to recognize exactly where they are in relation to a situation, maybe a change process or a challenge. And it helps them move toward ownership and action. It fundamentally evaluates what we call the locus of control. See, when people feel like everything is controlled by external forces, they just freeze up. This non-judgmental working toolkit helps them identify where their power actually lies. And this brilliantly illustrates the core concept, the huge difference between operating below the line versus above the line. The bottom rungs of the ladder represent powerlessness and avoidance. You know, being unaware, blaming others, making excuses, or just waiting and hoping someone else fixes the problem. But the higher rungs, man, that's where the power is. That's acknowledging reality, owning the issue, finding solutions, and actually making things happen. It creates a sort of spatial memory palace. When you think of a ladder, you instantly understand that the entire goal is upward movement from passivity right into empowerment. So why does this distinction matter so much? Well, as Fred Clements writes, if people remain only in blame, excuse, or waiting mode, they may lose energy and influence. And look, let's be real, it is completely understandable that people drop below the line during major organizational changes, unexpected pressures, or when they're faced with decisions they didn't even make. We all do it, but staying there, that literally drains their agency. It leaves them feeling like helpless passengers rather than active participants in their own careers. The core value of this tool is that it acts like a circuit breaker for that drained energy. It unblocks stuck thinking. It restores a real sense of agency to the individual. It gives a manager and an employee a totally neutral shared language to discuss performance. And maybe most importantly, it turns passive complaints into active ownership. Now, to be clear, the tool doesn't falsely claim that everything is within their control, because that would just be toxic positivity. Instead, it asks, given the current reality, what can you actually influence? Right. Now let's talk about how to actually use this thing, because this is where things can easily go sideways. The absolute golden rule of the ladder is emphasize self-diagnosis. Ask, don't tell. If a manager points at a rung and basically accuses someone of making excuses, defensiveness kicks in instantly. The real magic, the true power, lies in letting the individual evaluate themselves. The instructional flow for doing this in a one-to-one session is beautifully simple. Literally just 3 steps. Step 1, present the ladder. Just put it on the desk or share it on your screen. Step 2, invite self-diagnosis by asking them where they see their own mindset. And step 3, ask what would help them move up just one single rung. You aren't asking them to leap from blaming others to conquering the world in a 20-minute meeting. You are just looking for the next logical step. So the crucial point here is the specific phrasing of the invitation. You simply ask, where do you think you are on this ladder at the moment? That specific non-judgmental question is an absolute game changer. It shifts the dynamic entirely. The person reflects, and they almost always diagnose themselves accurately. They take ownership of the diagnostic process itself, which means think about it. They're already stepping into a space of accountability without even realizing it. Once they figure out where they are, say they admit they've kind of been waiting and hoping, you follow up with this. What would need to happen for you to move up one rung? And then you just pause. Let the silence do the heavy lifting. This exact question safely invites movement without overwhelming the person. It doesn't demand they fix everything right this second. It just asks what it would take to move from waiting to simply acknowledging the reality of the situation. But hey, we absolutely need a vital credibility check here. There are some crucial mistakes you must avoid. Do not, and I mean do not, use this tool to shame people. Everyone drops to the bottom of the ladder sometimes. Do not use it as a weapon in performance management. And critically, do not use it to dismiss real systemic toxicity or barriers. If someone is experiencing a genuinely unsafe work environment, grief, trauma, or severe burnout, telling them to just own it is wildly inappropriate and actively harmful. We really have to reinforce the correct mindset here. Accountability is about ownership and action. It is not about punishment. The ladder is designed to help people find agency, where agency actually exists. It should never, ever be used to shift the blame for massive organizational failures or poor leadership onto the shoulders of individual team members. When used correctly, it is a highly supportive tool, not a disciplinary one. To see how seamlessly this fits into your broader toolkit, it actually pairs incredibly well with the famous Grow coaching model. Goals, reality, options, and will. The accountability ladder acts as the perfect practical reality check during the reality stage. It helps the person clearly identify their current reality. Are they blaming or are they acknowledging? And that feeds directly into the option stage by asking what they need to move up. Let's ground this in a highly recognizable workplace scenario. Imagine you've got a team member who is deeply frustrated by a recent departmental restructure. You introduce the ladder. They self-diagnose and say, honestly, I'm stuck on blaming others. Well, just by saying that out loud, they realize they cannot jump straight to finding solutions. The very next step up is simply to acknowledge reality, and recognizing that one small step up, it sparks a massive psychological shift from complaining toward actual real agency. Bringing our narrative full circle, let's look back at the exact problem we started with today. How do we finally unblock a stuck conversation, clear away the defensiveness, and genuinely help someone move forward when they feel entirely powerless? How do we stop that endless cycle of complaining and start building real momentum? Well, the answer is simple, but it is profound. We do it by providing a clean, non-judgmental map out of their frustration. The accountability ladder doesn't force anyone to change. Instead, it empowers them to clearly see their own mindset, allowing them to consciously choose ownership, action, and solutions over blame and waiting. It completely transforms a confrontational management meeting into a collaborative, forward-looking coaching conversation. If you want to transform the way you lead and coach your team, this is just one of the 30 incredible methods detailed in Fred Clements' work. For more information, head over to clementsconsultancy.com to buy a discounted PDF copy of the book, or head over to Amazon for the ebook or printed version. Equip yourself with these tools and start having real conversations that create real change. So the next time you find yourself in a stalled conversation, ask yourself, are you just going to point the finger, or are you going to offer them the ladder? Thanks so much for joining me on this X-Player.